Well, howdy, folks. Today we're going to get into probably going to be one of the most controversial subjects. But we're talking about the 6.5 Creedmoor. Um, Now, some people will say that it's just a laser, anything hit by it goes straight down. Other people will say, I got one and I wasn't that impressed with it. Kind of underwhelming, um, if you will. And then, of course, there's even people that'll say that's way too small for deer. I personally don't have any experience with it, but there are. I have family that use it. Um, and last year, I think there was 2 deer in our party that were taken with the 6.5. And from what I was told was they hit them right behind the front shoulder and went right down. So that is pretty impressive. I've hit a lot of deer behind the front shoulder with 30-06, and they went a little ways before expiring. One thing that I think the 6.5 really benefits from are better bullets. Now you can get cheaper cup and core bullets in the 6.5, but a lot of people, when they're using the 6.5, are going to use a little more of a premium bullet, which stays together real well. I was going to ask those guys if they got an exit wound on either one of them, but they said both of them said that the deer dropped, which I've kind of gone online and different forums and stuff and asking people, or just kind of seeing what people had to say, and there was quite a few people that said they got just an instant drop on the deer with the 6.5, which I'm not going to say didn't happen. Really, to be honest with you, from what I've heard on white-tailed deer size game, it is at ranges that most people take shots at deer. 400 yards is in the Midwest, northern Minnesota. Of course, we get out in North Dakota, now you're talking 5, 6, even 700 yards. I haven't heard a lot of people taking deer at that range, but 200 yards is not a uncommon shot in northern Minnesota. So, from what I've been hearing, it's done pretty well in that regard. And again, the 6.5, really, these are, well, this is green tip. It must be armor piercing. No, this is Sierra Game King. And they don't launch really that fast. Muzzle velocity roughly 2,900 feet a second, which is, I think, slower. And this is a 130 grain bullet, and the 270 with a 130 grain bullet is launching at about 3,000 feet a second, so it's a little bit slower. Not a whole lot, but anyway, I have heard other people, if they're stepping up into bigger size game like elk. I had a client he was an elk outfitter from Colorado, up in Alaska. He was hunting with us, and he liked to make fun of it. He called it the 6.5 Needmore, or the bleed more, which maybe on an elk. An elk is quite a bit different build wise than a whitetail, obviously. But as far as whitetail rounds, they're I think it's would be just fine. One thing that a lot of people say that they really like is the lack of recoil. I mean, obviously there's some, but it's pretty light. And just to think of it, I have shot one, and I don't think I shot it twice. But I can't, if I can't even remember the recoil, I guess it wasn't that bad. One thing, if I were to get one, I would be interested in using it on coyotes. But I kind of wonder if it wouldn't be a little bit too wide bullet diameter going to cause damage pelts, and I would rather not damage the pelts if I can. But if it's not going so fast, that has a lot to do with your pelt damage. Of course, bullet design does too, but so that would be something I'd be interested. If anybody out there has taken coyotes with the 6.5, I'd be interested to know what if there was pelt damage or not. But no, from what I've heard, but the 6.5 has done just fine on whitetails. Even at closer ranges. I guess I don't personally haven't enough experience with it to really say, other than from what I've heard of, those were like perfect. Almost every story that I've heard that like is praising the 6.5 a lot was a perfect behind the shoulder double lung shot. Again, with probably more premium bullets. I shouldn't say the most premium, but probably a little better than your typical cheap cup and cores. But when it comes to that this is kind of where I prefer a bigger, heavier bullet, because it does give me that. What am I trying to say? It gives me a bigger margin of error. A lot of people say, "Oh, geez, shot placement." Which, yes, I agree with shot placement, but they're with a bigger, heavier bullet, you have a wider margin of error. Oh, geez, you didn't put the bullet in the right spot. Which, even with 30-06, if you hit them in the guts, they will go a long ways. I once tracked a little buck that I got shot, and thank goodness there was snow on the ground, but I tracked him, 2-3 miles, and finally caught up to him, and I recovered him. But so there, yeah, and that was a Winchester PowerPoint. Another reason I don't use Winchester PowerPoints, but that's one thing with the 6.5, with the low recoil. Yeah, shot placement, pretty good. But my favorite place to hit whitetails now is through the front shoulder, break them down. And does it always work? No, obviously not. But it does give me that margin of error with a bigger bullet, bigger, heavier, wider bullet, that it doesn't matter quite so much about shot placement. And of course, there's going to people that are going to jump all over me for that. Like, oh, geez, you're wasting meat and you're, well, okay. You're not ethical. Geez, Um, that's fine if you want to think that. Anyway, like Moose too, and the outfitter I worked for, that's where he always told people shoot them through the front shoulder. Um, so again, that's where a bigger, heavier bullet tends to kill faster than a smaller diameter bullet. Of course, not always, but when you have that margin of error, the 6.8 Western, for example, that 8-point buck that I took last fall, I more or less hit him in the guts, and he went 5 feet and expired. I barely clipped along, and it was a very strongly quartering shot. So there again, of course, a 6.8 is not much bigger than a 6.5 bullet, but it was a much heavier bullet. It was 165 grain AccuBond. So that was 35 grains heavier and a lot more powder behind it. A 250-yard shot, but that's my whole whole idea with the smaller calibers. I would consider a 6.5 on the smaller end of what I would use for big game, whitetail. I don't know if I would use it on anything bigger than a mule deer. I just, elk are awfully tough, and I would want that margin of error with a bigger, heavier, wider bullet with a lot more powder behind it. Just because, so my margin of error is quite a bit bigger, and I don't have to get such a perfect shot. So with that, I guess now you guys can come at me, 6.5 Creedmoor fans, or guys on the other end of the spectrum that love to hate the 6.5. I'm kind of in the middle. Sometimes I make fun of it, but have at it. Let me go. Whatever you think about it, let the comments roll. Anyway, I'm Pete Refshaw with Refshaw Outdoors, and keep your powder dry.